case you're not here, I mean.
Oh, well, sign in. I didn't sign out of it. Use another account. It's support at Henry County. There we go. And the password is capital Henry with a capital H. Capital C.
Wait a minute, I'm not sure.
Capital C. Oh, lowercase o. Number 5. 33. Okay, so now if you go to that, that one? No, that's not it. Go back to you. And why did it not?
I asked her, she just gave me a treat, which good thing to. Got this. You don't need
I think we're going to get started in about a minute. Mike Regner said he's on his way. If anyone else wants a cookie, I have some up here. We're going to call this work session of the Henry County Council to order. Our main topic today is to have a discussion with Jason Simler from Baker Tilly about the various options that are afforded to us to weigh and consider and prioritize for 2024. First, we have Judge McCord has asked to address the council, and I'm going to let him, as long as the base of that microphone's lit green, you're on. Thank you, Judge, for coming and sharing.
You're welcome. Thanks for listening. Hey, I don't know how proper, but anyway, today, earlier, 2 of my employees turned in their retirements. So I'm here about that. They're going to be retiring the 19th and the 31st of January. I know, I don't understand it, but I know we've always had a policy here where the department pays for, what is it, vacation and longevity. We don't have that in our budget. I can't wait until that's paid. I have to have employees immediately because we send, every time we go into court, 2 of them have to be in court with me and the 3rd one's out front. So I'm going to need training. So I need to be able to hire on January the 20th and February the 1st my replacements. And so we don't budget that in there because you don't give us money to budget that in there. So my position's simple on that. It's been that way with every department. I saw Judge Witham and Judge Crane do it. I don't think it's our responsibility. I think it's the county's responsibility to pay those things. I don't have time to pay them, and I don't have the money to pay them, and I need those 2 people on those dates. So I just need you guys to tell me how you can do that so I can get those people in on those 2 dates. So I just want to give you a heads up. I wanted to come as soon as they retired. They were waiting on the 30th, your last meeting, until after everything was approved, and then that's when they put those in. So they put them in. I don't know if they took them up yesterday or today, but one of the 2 days I signed them so they could bring them up. And so they are official now. I mean, they're going to be gone. And so I'm officially in scramble mode over the next 6 weeks.
So you're requesting what, vacation, retirement?
Whatever it is you usually expect the departments to pay for that they don't have, and then they always have to leave this gap until they have enough money. I'm not going to have that gap.
Do you,
Yeah,
do you have a dollar amount of what that would be?
they're right here. These, thank you, Debbie.
That's about $5,500 each.
Yeah. Comp hours,
Which ones do we usually pay? Oh, comp and vacation. Okay, so it's almost $6,500.
yeah.
And you'll notice when you get I brought a copy, but they took an official copy to them. There used to be that silly little paragraph at the end that said, I agree that we're going to pay that money out of ours. I took that out of there. So they were concerned about that, and I said, no, you're still retiring. I'll take care of that. We'll talk about that. So I just need to know sooner rather than later that you guys can do that, because this is the nice way to do it. It's got to be done. I've got to be able to hire them as soon as I can.
Okay.
Let me rephrase that, Ken, and I said that wrong. I've got to begin the hiring process as soon as I can. I don't have to have them in but I do need somebody in. Like I said, Sharon leaves the 19th. That's a Friday. I need somebody on that following Monday. And then Cheryl's is January 31st. That's a midweek, and I might be able to go a day or 2 there, but just not much. We were supposed to have a jury trial tomorrow, and just as an example, when we do have jury trials, 2 of the girls are always in the courtroom in and out during trials. Actually, they're in my courtroom less during trials. On a normal Tuesday like today, we had 52 people this morning, and when that happens, I've got two of my staffs always in the courtroom during that. The 3rd one's out front taking care of what they can. And then on like Tuesday afternoon, we have anywhere from 25 to 40 every Tuesday afternoon. And so Tuesday's our worst day, but any day we have criminal and any day we have jail, we have to have 2 in the courtroom. But because of the way our court runs, it's a little different than the other courts because everything is so much higher turnover.
Okay.
So
We'll take that under advisement,
All right.
probably get with Debbie and look at options.
So question being, okay, I know you don't have an exact answer, but when can I expect to know?
We should have more information within a week.
Okay.
It should have a
But we can't make a decision until
28th
the 28th.
of this
I won't be
month.
here that day, so I won't be here for it, but somebody can let me know what that decision is, and then that'll push things really quick if we don't know before that. I mean, I'm going to go ahead and post it.
Okay.
I know I cannot, I'm not being, right? I know I cannot mandate what you pay my people, but I think I can mandate that they have to be hired on those 2 dates. And if I need to do that, I want to know that as quick as I can. If you're not going to be able to do this, please let me know so I can make my move and move on, because I've got to get them hired,
Yes.
okay?
We'll know the answer to that question within a week. We can do something official on the
I
28th.
understand. I understand if it's not official, but if you know you're going to do it, if you can, however, if somebody can just
We have
let
to
me
look
know.
at the money and where we're going to get it from.
I understand. I mean, we got to replace them. They're there.
Sure.
I mean, I think in these, I don't want to call them old. Sharon and Cheryl have been here for 30-some years each. So I'm going to replace them with probably people that have either not been here a couple of years or not at all. So you're going to save a lot in longevity right off the bat. And you've got I think you have a new process for don't you, for the vacation time or sick hours, you didn't never change that? Maybe you guys will do that, I don't know.
Not yet.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you. I appreciate you getting me in today.
Okay, thank you.
So can I interject? Debbie, the two documents you gave me, we would need to figure out the comp hours and the vacation time for both of those employees, okay? For the council's information, that total is $10,853.85 that we can consider at a later date.
That's total for both.
Correct.
Okay. I put that down. Somebody will get with you, Debbie, over the next week. You're going to be in next week, over the next 10 days. Okay. One of us will get with you. Thank you. Next, we have our special guest, who we've seen here numerous times before. We need to consider options. I know there's been some legislation that gives us more food for thought over the past year. And we know we've been looking at safety lit, public safety lit. We've been looking at the jail lit because we're bringing in more than the extra 20% that we can use for operation. We're going over even that. And if we can have to modify one, look at one, adjust the other, adjust both. We have a new EMS lit that we need to give serious consideration to. There's a new judicial lit. I know Debbie passed some things around. You were tagged on that yesterday. It can be used for county staff expenses. Basically, those state positions that we have to pay for. Courts, prosecutors, office, public defender office, probation department, community corrections. That's a wide umbrella. And then there's also an EDC lit that we've not, economic development lit, that we've not really seriously spoken about, but I think there's council members who've told me they'd like to at least hear about that option. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm sure there's certain council members that have lots of questions.
Well, thank you for having me here this evening. I can take this a couple different directions. I do kind of have a PowerPoint presentation that talks about, I think, a little bit about all those lists that was just discussed. I can go through that if you'd like, and then we can kind of just address your questions, or we can just start with your questions, however you prefer.
I've seen that PowerPoint at French Lick. I think it would be very valuable for all the council to see that, and you kind of do a narrative of it.
And maybe send us a copy.
We may have a copy before he sends it to us. But I remember the PowerPoint that you and very similar to that. Yes, and it was a good review.
So the first page here is just kind of looking at all the various local income taxes that are available to the county, and then what Henry County currently has in place. So the very first one there, we have a property tax relief, which I'll go through each one of these more in detail. The maximum rate that is applicable to that is 1.25%. The county currently has 0.25% rate towards property tax relief, and that's really just to help reduce property tax bills. So it goes towards your general funds. So you have 1% remaining in that. That's also important because, again, it helps reduce property tax bills. It doesn't really generate any new revenue to the county. The next kind of bucket there you see, 2.5% is the maximum. We call those the expenditure rate. Within that, you can see there's now 6 different buckets within that that you can adopt within the expenditure rate. You currently have the certified shares, or what we used to call COIT. You've had for a very long time. That's 1%. There's the public safety tax that you just increased a few months ago to 0.35. Again, part of that was for the PSAP. Then there's the economic development, which you haven't adopted yet. There's the correctional rehab facilities rate of 0.2%. And then the EMS and the judicial that was just mentioned. Sorry. Yes, it does. So that PSAP that the county just adopted a few months ago, that was part of the public safety income tax. It's just the first 0.1 you get to take off the top and keep for yourself for the county unit to help pay for the PSAP.
And we're still expected to receive income in January.
Correct. Yep, correct.
That's good to hear.
So our safety lit rate is
Yep.
0.25.
Yeah, so the max is 2.5.
Uh-huh.
You currently have remaining 0.95. So of those 6 above there, we can adopt an additional 0.95% rate amongst any of those rates. And then the very last on the far right is a special purpose rate. Before these new buckets were allowed, before the correctional facility rate came into place, most communities would go to the legislation in the springtime and ask for a new rate for jails and courthouses. That was often how large projects like that were funded. I think that became more common as more jails became in demand. So the legislators instead of passing a new tax at the state house, they gave the counties the ability to adopt this correctional and rehabilitation rate of up to 0.2 within that rate. So they kind of pushed the ability to levy a tax on the local unit instead of the state house.
And we're probably going to still have questions on that 0.2 and the legislation that was going back and forth.
Yeah.
Though probably we need some clarification to make sure what we last heard is the last word.
So that's kind of the rates that you currently have now, and what you can adopt going forward. And I'll talk about each one of these in more detail as we go through. Page 2, I put this in here. This is as of 2024. I think there could be some changes to this in case there were some late counties that adopted at the end of September, October. But right now you can see the range. The highest county has a total tax rate of 3%, total income tax rate, and that's Randolph County. The lowest, the far right, is 0.5%. That's Porter County. And then you can see there you are basically right in the middle, a total tax rate of 1.8%. So I just thought this might be a good comparison to kind of see where Henry County falls within the rest of the state.
Did you say the 3% county was?
Randolph.
Okay. Glad the windmills are bringing in so much money.
So the next page is, again, the property tax relief rate, the first one that I talked about, that the county currently has a 0.25% rate. Again, this really provides a credit. I don't know if you ever look at your property tax bill, but you'll see that there's a small credit to everyone's tax bill in the county, and property taxpayers receive a credit because of this income tax that you collect. So again, it's just put in place to help reduce property tax bills.
So the higher our rate is, the more our property taxes are reduced.
Correct.
So we're giving a small reduction.
Correct.
How does that compare to other counties?
I don't have a direct count. I mean, it ranges from 0.25 to 1%. There's a handful that don't have any. I'd say more than a handful. I mean, it's kind of all over the place.
So it's the kind of aqua blue on your page 2. Property tax
Yes.
relief. Yeah, there are some with none and some with quite a bit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I see on page 2, right. Mm-hmm. So there in the aqua blue, that's how many counties that have them. It probably looks over half. The next page, page 4, again, the expenditure rate. Again, within the expenditure rates, the certified shares are your COET, economic development, public safety, correctional rehab, EMS, and judicial. Page 5, the certified shares. So again, this is your COET that you currently have. It can be used for any legally available purpose. It can be spent on any legal expense of the county. Right now, it goes into your general fund. It's distributed to all the units that impose a property tax. So that's important. I'll show that here in a minute. So if you were to increase your certified shares rate, which is a 1% right now, you could increase that. That revenue could be used for any expense within the county, but any new additional revenue that you collect, it would be shared between the county, the cities and towns and townships and libraries.
So that breakdown when we did the PSAP was like, we were like 47%, and Newcastle was 35%, and it went way down to Middletown, Knightstown, and the small towns got virtually pennies.
Right. Yeah.
I don't want to jump ahead, Jason, but are you going to talk about what we can do as county council versus what has to go to the tax council?
Yes, I will. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
For the certified shares, that's actually the next point. For the certified shares, if you want to increase certified shares, that would have to go to the income tax council to make that approval, which is again made up of the county, cities, and towns. And to get that approved, you'd have to get a majority. So just kind of like when we talked about the PSAP, if we wanted to increase the PSAP rate by more than 0.1%, we would have to get the city or a couple other units involved to approve it to get more than 51%. So certified shares, COET, if you want to increase that, you would have to get the other entities, or at least Newcastle, involved to approve increasing that rate as well.
I think we figured that we were a high enough percent, close enough to 50, that it could be us in Knightstown or us in Middletown.
I haven't looked at it for a while. I don't know if you...
It was really close.
It was very close. I remember when we did it a few years ago, it was maybe 2 of the 3, so it may be different now.
Okay, yeah.
The economic development, page 6, and I think someone mentioned that this was one that the county was interested in. Currently, the county does not have an economic development income tax. It's very similar to the COET. It can be used for any legally available purpose. If you look at the name, you see economic development, and the reason why is because when this income tax was first put into law, it could only be used for economic development purposes. But I think in the mid-90s, the law was changed to broaden the usage, so now it can be used for any legally available purpose, just like your COET. However, it would have its own separate fund. It wouldn't get distributed into your general fund like your COET is. But it could be used for anything. And the difference that it has is it would be distributed to the county, cities, and towns. So you wouldn't have to share it with the townships or the libraries. I shouldn't say you wouldn't have to share it with them, but they wouldn't receive any legally. So if you were to adopt, a 0.1% COET versus a 1.1% edit, the county would receive a larger share of the edit because you'd be required to share with less units. Yes. Yes, so the tax council would also have to vote on that.
You said county and cities, and was there another entity you'd go to? You said would not have to go to libraries or
No, not townships.
townships.
Right.
Okay.
The next page is talk about the public safety. So I know this is one that you are familiar with. It's very similar to the edit, as that you only have to distribute that to the county, cities, and towns. But it can only be used for public safety type expenses. Just trying to think, and then as we talked about, you could take a portion off the top for PSAP, which you're very familiar with because you just did. Trying to think if there's anything else.
I've got a question. When we did PSAP, the .1 brought us in like 1.1 million, give or take. Actually, what Debbie shared here, 1.126. Would that be similar, or is it very, in these different lists you're talking about, is that a rule of thumb that a .1 would bring in 1.1 million in our case, or is that across the
Yes.
board?
Total, yes. And then, but your share would be different depending upon what tax you put in place.
Whether we're under the tax council or not?
Well, not so much that, but like, again, for COIT, if you had increased your COIT by 0.1%, you'd receive an additional $1.1 million in revenue, but then you have to allocate that 1.1 million between yourself, between all the cities and towns, and between the townships. So you get a smaller allocation. of
As
that
per
1.1
that
million.
population proportion.
But if you did edit or public safety, you'd still get 1.1 million, but you'd be allocating it against a smaller group of units. So you get a bigger allocation in towns. Yeah. Yeah. Page 8 is just kind of a list of things that you could use the public safety for. You have public safety and have, so you've used that. Page 9, I know this is something that we've talked about off and on for the last couple of months, is the new legislation where the adopting body may adopt a resolution to allocate a portion of public safety to the township fire departments, volunteer fire departments, fire protection territories, and fire protection districts. So the key word there is being may. You're not required, because I know there was some misunderstanding there.
I think it was required at one point, but what passed went
Yeah,
to May.
one of the draft bills that was out there did require that if someone came in front of you and asked, you were required to give it. But what was actually approved this session said may. Mm-hmm. Correct. Now you could increase it to help pay for it. Yeah, but yeah, and it's taken off the top. So if you were to, let's say you had a couple of these departments come in front of the council and ask for, some funds, let's say $100,000, what you would do is once Debbie gets, the money every month, that you would take off the public safety portion. Then you would take off the $100,000 for the entity, the fire department, and then what's left would get allocated to the county, to the cities and towns. So you would be taking potentially, public safety money from all the other entities as well. So I can tell you, AIM, cities and towns, they don't like this at all because it's taking complete control away from them into yours, and they could lose a substantial amount of revenue and not have any say.
Your handout shows that it's .05, so half of the .1 that we just adopted on PSAP. Is that in .01 increments also? Seems like everything is either in .1
so.
increments or .01 increments.
I'd
So it wouldn't have to be,
double check that, but I think so.
.05 is the max. And we'd have to take that off the top.
Now, there is, as you know, before this legislation, there was already legislation where these entities could come to the council
And ask
for money, and there was no cap of .05, and there was no. Let me see if I have it on here. Here it says, the distribution is based upon assessed value of real property less land. The old law didn't have any kind of calculation. You could kind of pick and choose. That legislation is still in effect. So this is on top of that. So you could still use the old legislation, and from my understanding, I'd confirm that with an attorney, but I think if you could still use the old legislation if you wanted to.
When it says not including land, I think when we were talking initially a few months ago with the fire departments, that's farmland,
All land.
all land.
The changes to the public safety lit, let's say we wanted to look at increasing by .05 just for those fire departments. Is that something that also has to go to the tax council?
It would.
Thank you.
Is there any talk about doing away with the irregularities between co-ed counties and non-co-ed counties, having a tax council and not, because it seems so convoluted? There's like 28 counties that are co-ed that has to go to the tax council. In our case, if it's above .1. Most counties don't have to do that.
Right.
It's like Monroe County, Bloomington is like 80% of the county's population. They rule the whole thing. The county council down there almost has no say.
Yeah.
At least we have almost a half say.
Yeah, there are a couple places in the state that are like that. But no, I have not heard them going away with the income tax council, just because that's, I think, how those original income taxes were approved in the past. So, not saying that that wouldn't happen, but I've not heard anything.
County Council Association's pushing hard, but I don't think they have a prayer.
The next one is the correctional rehabilitation rate, the jail rate, we call it, that the county has. At the time when we adopted this, the max that you could adopt was up to .2, which the county did. In this case, the county council could make that decision. You didn't have to go to the income tax council because it could only be used for jail and rehabilitation facilities. 100% of what you collect, as you know, is received and collected by the county. So it doesn't get shared with any of the other units. The law was changed this year that if you have debt outstanding, you can increase it to 0.3%. So you have debt outstanding, so you have, according to the statute, have the ability to increase it to 0.3. So I don't know if there was some county out there that had adopted 0.2 and then it wasn't enough to cover the bond payment, so they revised the statute to help them out.
That's not our problem.
No, it's not, but it gives you some.
Our problem is redistributing.
So, and also at the time, when it's changed a couple of times. When it was first put into place, you could use 100% of that 0.2 for operating costs. The next year, they restricted it to say that only 20% of what you collect could be used for operating. And now this is where it gets really messy, is last year, from what I've been told by David Bodoff, was the intent, and he's talked to the originator of the bill, the intent was to go back and say up 100% of that 0.2 that you collect could be used for operating. However, the way it was written in the statute was far from that. It was a fraction of what you can use.
We would have gotten $4,500.
Yeah. So, and that was some of the I mean, I think we all read it, what the intent was, and then when I think State Board of Accounts started really reading into it, they thought, well, this isn't what it says. So that's where kind of the last minute, everyone, wait a minute, what's the law? And I think the intent was 100% of the 0.2. I've talked to Dave. I think they're going to try to look at that at the legislation next year. Not for sure, but I mean, again, I think that's the intent of what the law.
As of now, we're stuck at 20% of operating.
And then also the term of the year is also important. And this is something to think about, not just for Henry County, but all the other local income taxes that we've talked about. There's no sunset date. They go on forever until the county council or the income tax council makes a decision to reduce it or eliminate it. But the jail rate here, it ends either 22 or 25 years after it was adopted. So that's important. I don't know if any of us will be here in 20 years, but as you have done and are thinking about increasing, a lot of this revenue is being used for operating costs. So when this time runs out, more than likely the council is going to have to put it back in place again for another 22 or 25.
I don't remember when we adopted it. You have that comp plan. Yeah, but January or after. Because that's the date that makes the difference.
I think 20.
So we're under the 25 years?
Actually, it might have been 19. I can't remember when those bonds were issued.
But it was after January 1, 19. So we're under the 25 years. But I don't know what we set it at the time. Was it 25 years? It seems like it was. It was 25? Okay.
So I think maybe limited to the 20%, but I think the intent is really you could use 100% of your jail lit for operating costs.
That would have helped us out this year.
If they correct it, that's the, okay.
Is there anything we need to do to follow up and make sure that, I mean, I'm thinking about lobbying efforts here, right? If we're going to try to get them to address it.
I think it would be well to work with the AIC and have them that be an initiative this year to clean that up.
Okay.
Just so there is no, again, I think there's, again, not an attorney, but I think the intent is one thing, but that doesn't mean that State Board of Accounts wouldn't come in and say, that's not the letter of the law.
I know the AIC's been doing a lot of lobbying and talking about this bill with them. David said they were moving to line.
So I just think, continue talking to your legislators and make sure that they're aware of the situation, of the intent, and how it's tying your hands unintentionally.
I'm pretty sure that's on the agenda with David and Ryan from last I heard.
The dollars, that 20% or the excess dollars above our bond can be used for operating and maintenance expenses. Can they be used for capital expenses as well?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And that was really the original intent of the bill was for capital expenses and bonds, because again, so many counties were going to the legislators asking for a special purpose tax for a new jail. So, but yeah, so that the original intent wasn't for counties who had jails and just wanted to do it for operating, but they understood that that was a need, and also bigger jails usually mean more operating costs.
If we raise to 0.3, do we need to do that with the tax council, or can we do that on our own?
Just county council.
You were referring to the jail tax, right? From 0.2 to 0.3.
The next one is the emergency medical service lit. Again, that can just be adopted by the county council, so you don't have to go to the income tax council. It can, you can adopt a rate up to 0.2%.
I do have a question about that, Jason.
Mm-hmm.
And this microphone's dead, otherwise I would get the microphone. So maybe and others have been reading the legislation
Mm-hmm.
enacted, and it appears as though it can only be used for counties that, implemented for counties that only have one ambulance service in the county.
Mm-hmm.
I know Mandy's already reached out to Senator Ross and to Representative Criswell. Very working, and that's a question because we have four. We have Shirley, Middletown, Henry County, and Newcastle. And the way she's gone over the legislation several times, and the way it reads is you can only have one.
Mm-hmm.
And when she talked to, I can't remember if it was Senator Ross or Representative Criswell, they were looking to, so you might check that. Because that was, when she read it and she called me, she was like, we can't implement this because we have four services.
Yeah, I'll have to look at that. I know we talked about that. I'll have to look at that because I don't remember that specific requirement. Yeah.
She's like, hey, if I'm wrong, that'd be great.
And this is one where it has changed over the last couple of years as well, because it was originally adopted. The county had to provide 100% of services. You couldn't share it with anyone else. And that, maybe one or two counties fit that requirement, so then they amended it where a county doesn't have to provide 100%. So I don't know if it's somewhat related or if there is but I can look that up.
Yeah, that sounds pretty important to know for sure. Whether we can even consider this.
I'll look that up. But any other questions with the EMS?
Again, if we went with a 0.1, we'd be looking at about $500,000 a year.
A million.
No, a million.
A million.
Oh, that's right, same as PSAP, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, this one doesn't get shared amongst the others. That's why the more than one service came up in a discussion that I had elsewhere as well. And I was told that it was one county-funded service. You couldn't have two county-funded services. But I didn't hear that from an attorney or a legislator, so.
And then when you check if there are more than one services, can they be used? Maybe they can't be used to fund all of them, but maybe it could be used to fund one of them. I don't know.
I'll look.
Okay.
I'll look to see the restrictions. The next one is the judicial lit. Again, so that can be adopted just by the county council. Does not have to go through the local income tax council. Again, a rate up to 0.2%.
And we don't share it.
I'm sorry.
And we don't share it.
And you don't share it.
That's because we have the state officials that
Right.
the county's paying for.
Yeah.
Dear legislature, thank you. We'll send you a Hallmark card for another lit that you're not funding.
Now, I will, and I'd have to, if this is something you want me to look into more, or Debbie and I can, but I do remember that second bullet point from the bottom. There are some special annual reporting requirements that, and it's probably just making sure that you're spending it on the correct expenditures, but there is some more administrative requirements that the county would have to do if this is adopted instead.
And so if our total staffing expense is 2 million, we can only fund $1 million. Is that what this 50% of budgeted operational staffing expense?
Yes.
And as I read the requirements, we have to submit what our total funding expenses were, how much we paid of it, and how much this lit paid of it. That's the reporting requirements, I understand.
And this is staff expenses. It's not operating expenses outside of staff, is that correct? And I'm looking at the email that Debbie sent yesterday.
Yeah. I would defer to an attorney on that, only because I have seen other questions related to similar on staffing. So I think there is some gray areas if you're.
Reading her email, it seemed like maybe this is not set in stone yet. It's a recent, they refer back to the Lake County case.
Yep.
And this is the interpretation of the State Board of Accounts, and this is the interpretation of judicial, and this is the court case. And it makes them wonder if this is the final word on this legislation.
But it is new legislation, so there is going to be always some subject to some interpretation on something new. But when you get to what it can be spent on, and that's where your email is, they're trying to get State Board of Accounts interpretation on what it can be spent on. I'm trying to think what other income tax it was, because it was for operating, I think, and they were trying to get, okay, with like the electricity, if it's shared amongst different buildings, would that count towards? So there are some gray areas where if you want to look at this, and if you're trying to maximize it, we might want to get some opinions on. If you want to try to push it as much as we can.
Public Defenders Association, Kyle, has been wanting us to seriously look at. We did a couple of years ago, but the judges actually said in a sit-down, this is up to the council, not us, because we asked what their recommendation was. And theirs was, if it's not broke, don't fix it. It was pretty simple, but there's a 40% reimbursement through that association. And I see Public Defenders, one of those offices that could be under this judicial lit. So I think more study, maybe. He's our liaison for that whole area over there in Justice Center.
Page 13, this is just kind of an illustration, again, just showing, and I didn't have one prepared for Henry County with the certified shares very easily, but this kind of gives you an idea of the difference between if you were to adopt $600,000, if you go through certified shares or COIT, in this instance, the county got $418,000. If you applied the same rate towards public safety, they'd receive $508,000, but if you did it towards jail rate, they'd get 100% of it. So it's just kind of an illustration of how depending again what your goals are, that might help determine, what revenue stream or what local income tax you were to adopt. Now, just because I do represent a lot of the other communities throughout this country, if you are helping, if you do certified chairs for public safety, a lot of the other entities are getting revenue as well that are needed as well. So I have to put this plug in there too for my clients.
So if you're advising Newcastle, you don't say if that stingy county council would only fill in the blank.
If I'm advising the city of council, I'm saying you need to talk to the council and encourage them to adopt public safety.
Without the word stingy.
Yeah. Which I may or may not have said.
That's his story, and he's sticking with it. This is very helpful.
And in page 14, there are a couple of things. Again, we kind of talked about this through public safety, about doing it before August 1. But I can tell you even that, I've received some emails from the Department of Government Finance that have a different opinion on this. The other thing I don't put on here, but I don't know if it came up, but one thing that's important to remember, you can only make one change a year. So that's something if you're thinking about making a change, and you can make multiple changes if you want to increase multiple local income tax or decrease one and increase another, and we can do that all in one ordinance or resolution. But we can't do one, like say in July, and then come back and say, oh, we wish we'd have done another one and do another one in August. We'd have to wait till the following year.
How does that work with tax council and county council? We've got 3 options that we can vote on and not involve the tax council. But a combination thereof would, it would hurt. We don't have to take something that's in our purview to the tax council, but could we pass something that's in our purview one time and then something that's in the tax council's purview at a different time in the same year?
If I had to guess, I could see you have to do both in one, but I'll double check that with the attorney.
And then how would that work on the actual, because there's an ordinance or a resolution or something that the tax council wouldn't need to have a vote on some of those things. So I guess I'd like to know how that works.
I can find that out for you.
Thank you. And is it, I went to one of the conferences where they said changes could be made in March or August. Mm-hmm. So a change made in March would have a different effective date and a different collection date. Is that what you're going
through next?
If you
look at the last page, you can adopt it actually any time throughout the year. But if you adopt anything from January through August of 2024, it would become effective October 2024. It basically means people start seeing that tax being taken out of their paycheck starting in October, and you start collecting revenue in January 2025. From September to October, taxpayers wouldn't start seeing it being taken out of check until January 2025, but you'd still start receiving money in 2025.
Would the money you receive in January 25 be less if you adopted September to October? Or
no. It's just that stabilization account that the state has, you get that supplemental amount, at least you have for the last couple of years, and if it gets over 15%, that additional just goes towards that stabilization account. So it kind of fills that up faster for you.
There is 2 legislation to change it to 11%. Did you know that?
Oh, no.
AIC's working with them to take that 15% down to 11%.
But for supplemental or what he was talking about?
Yeah, so every year at the beginning of the year, they'll look at that stabilization account, and if you have more than 15% of what you collect, they'll give you what's above that. So that's why the last couple of years, you've gotten an additional distribution. Now they're looking at it. I know counties have been complaining because 15% is quite a bit of money that the state is holding back of your money.
Not to mention the 5% interest that they're earning on it by depositing it.
So every year there's been talk about trying to push that down even more so you get more of your money sooner. So it's 11%.
they may just like to keep it at 15% because of that 5% interest they're making. They're making a lot off that. No, I guarantee they're not giving us the interest.
So, but I think to your point, so if we were to, make a change in July of 2024, we can't go back and make a change in September of 2024. But I will ask about the difference between the two.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to know. I'd appreciate that.
What effect, I'm not sure I can wrap my head around, if the property tax, this is totally hypothetical, if the property tax relief is increased and we increase one of these other lits by 0.25%, maybe three different ones, 0.1, 0.1, 0.05. What overall effect is that? If we increase both the property tax 0.25 relief and we had a total of 0.25 in lits, maybe we did the edit, and maybe we did the judicial, and maybe we upped the public safety by 0.05. What happens in the whole scheme? I know taxpayers would get a relief, but
They'll see an increase in their income tax that they pay every year.
yes,
By 0.25% of whatever their adjusted gross income is. And if you increase their property tax relief, their property taxes will go down a small amount.
but it wouldn't be equal.
Probably not. Well, it depends upon if you're land rich in income poor. It depends upon what your assets you have. If you own a lot of land, a slight decrease in your property or increase in your property tax relief could mean substantial amount of savings in your property tax bills.
But if you're land poor and income poor, like most people in Denver County,
Yeah. Well, the other piece of that puzzle is you've got retirees on fixed incomes that they're not seeing income taxes, but it could provide relief to them in property taxes if they own their property, but you're going to increase taxes to the working folks. So changing that one has no impact on our general fund budget.
It would slightly, because if you're decreasing people's net property taxes, then you're decreasing the circuit breaker losses a little bit. So it would help you by
That makes sense,
increasing your
yeah.
property tax rates. You are decreasing your circuit breaker losses somewhat.
We'd have to raise it a lot.
Yeah.
See? Thank you.
Can you talk to us about our debt rate and how it compares to, because it's not, I mean, we collect taxes to pay our debt also, and more than a lot of other counties do. See, I'm talking about something I don't know very much about, so I don't sound very smart, but you've talked about how our debt rate's higher than other counties, and it raises our tax rate significantly, right?
I didn't hear the very beginning
Okay.
of your statement.
We've talked before about how if we look at this chart, our taxes are kind of in the middle.
Oh, the page,
But if we go to page 2.
okay.
But if you include our debt rate, what we collect to cover our debt, which is,
Property taxes.
not very smart, not sounding very smart to me. Is it, do we
have a
pay our
high
debt with
service.
our
We-
debt
we
service
do have a
rate? Is
high
that
debt
all out of our
service.
property taxes? Because I know Kenan has talked to me about this. I've tried to kind of understand how it affects our tax rate with other counties. And I just wanted to try to understand that better. Our debt, what do we pay it out of? And is it included in this 1.8%?
Some of it is. Your jail bonds are paid out of this 1.8 because it's paid out of the 0.2 jail rate. You have food and beverage bonds that are paid from the food and beverage tax. And then you have other bonds that are payable from property taxes. And then depending upon what report you look at, you also have county redevelopment district TIF debt that's payable just from TIF. I usually don't include TIF debt in county debt, but if you look on Gateway, it lumps it all together. So, and I've had other communities kind of complain about that because if you have, someone who's looking at just the Gateway and looking at county debt, they're looking at the Boar's Head bonds that Boar's Head bought that are payable just from their TIF, and if they don't pay their taxes, they don't get paid. There's no other responsibility of the county or the County Redevelopment Commission, but it shows up as county debt legally. So you kind of have to be careful from that, and that's an outlier, but that's one that's critical, because if you have someone that's really trying to critique the county and the council and decisions, they may lump that in there because it is. Legally it is, but from a responsibility, security, you have no other pledge except the tip from board's head.
We don't have any people critiquing us.
I didn't think so. So to answer your question, do you have high debt? I haven't really compared it to other counties, but I don't always like to do that because every county is unique. And like I said, you got food and beverage bonds. Most counties don't have food and beverage.
Right.
I mean, so you're using that revenue stream for a valuable purpose.
So our general obligation bonds coming out of our property
That's
taxes.
property taxes.
Right.
And that's different than like your GO bonds that we did and that we do every few years. That doesn't come from any of this. That's separate.
And what is that debt rate? We about maxed it out. And
That was your general obligation debt limit. Yes, we're getting close to maximizing it. But if you had a bigger project that you wanted to do, we could do what's called a lease financing, just like you did for the Justice Center, did a building corporation, and did. So I wouldn't worry too much about your debt limit if you're hitting that, because most communities, if you're doing a large project, you're going to be above your debt limit. I mean, like your jail, we had to go above your debt limit to do the jail, even though it's payable for income taxes. So it's a threshold that's out there, but it's one that's very often surpassed through just a different financing mechanism that's very common.
so if we did decide there was a need for a jail pod and we raised our jail lit and bonded again,
We'd probably do another lease financing.
and we would just cover it with the additional tax receipts from the jail lit, and it doesn't impact our debt rate ceiling because we're going to do the lease.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
I think what I was talking to Susan about earlier this year was when we look at the AIC book and you compare those counties that are between 40 and 50,000, and I think recently I added those counties that Wagner, Irwin, and Shealy used to compare our salaries, for example, with of those 10 entities. We were among the highest in debt service. I think that was because we had more outstanding bonds to pay off.
And I would look at how many of those counties have done jails recently. That's a big one. And then in those payments, are TIF bonds included? Those are two things I would look to see.
Because that would have made us look much higher if it includes those TIF bonds.
Yeah, just like looking on Gateway makes us look bad.
Yeah. And just like, and if you're the only county out of those 10 that have done a jail bond in the last couple of years, that's going to distort things a little bit. When I can tell you, I've worked on a lot of jails throughout the state that there's a lot larger bond issues in Henry County. But if you're not looking at those, like Fayette, Wayne, Randolph, none of them have done jails here that recently. So you got to be careful who you compare yourself to and look at some of the details.
Well, and I know the construction cost of jails. I'm glad we did it when we did it because it's just skyrocketing construction costs and now interest rates. It's all, we got in under the gun, I think.
Jason, there appears to be a trend with taxation shifting it over to income taxes. And I think some of the flyers I've read from representatives or senators that are just mailers like, oh, we're hoping to get rid of property taxes for everybody. Is there a bigger trend or something going on that would be helpful for us to know when we make decisions about the way our taxpayers in the county are going to be treated?
You are right. There is a trend. And if you listen to some, they would like for taxes to be more pushed towards income taxes. Property taxes is still the most stable revenue stream. It's the most stable if you look in the bond market. If you can sell a bond for property taxes versus income taxes, you're more likely going to get a more favorable rate for property taxes. So That always tells me that's who, what the market thinks is more secure. You've probably heard, personal property equipment, which is a huge part of any entity's tax base. Every year, they're eliminating more and more personal property that's taxable. The thought is, and I've been doing this for over 20 years, and every year there's proposed legislation to eliminate personal property taxes. But they haven't come up with anything to replace it, because that's a huge part of your revenue stream and your tax base. But again, that's another example where they're trying to get away from property taxes over to income taxes. So will that continue? I think it probably will, to some extent. I think you need to have a good balance. And not just for your revenue stream, but for your tax base, your taxpayers.
It just seems like everything's starting to be compartmentalized within the different necessary services within the county. And I didn't know if it's advisable to kind of stick with what's there, like purpose-built taxes for certain necessities. Any thoughts?
It is good because, just like in the council now, you have your expenses, and you'd like to try to match your expenses with your revenue that you're generating. So the legislators have tried to do that a little bit with the special jail rate, with the EMS rate, with the lit rate. The problem with that is, under the current statute, if you go to the first page, as a county as a whole, you're limited to 2.5%. So if you keep, and I'll say you, in counties in general, if you keep just cherry picking, okay, we're going to increase the tax just for EMS and collect all of it, there's cities and towns out there that, need public safety or, are hurting as well. Eventually, they're going to have to increase that 2.5 to something higher if they keep allowing counties to kind of cherry pick just for your specific services, or the schools and cities and towns and libraries are going to, dry up because they don't have any additional revenue. So I think that's also something to think about when you're looking at income taxes, the county and units within the county. Does that help answer your question?
So we get the 1.8 by adding the 0.25 tax relief, the 1 certified chairs, 0.35 public safety, and 0.2 jail.
Oh, and something I didn't say as you're listing all those off, unless something changes, there's some late additions to this. There's 47 counties that have higher income tax rates than Henry County.
We are really right in the middle. We're almost the median.
Yeah.
But that doesn't look at our debt. Yeah.
That doesn't look
And
at
you
that.
think
It just looks at your 1.8% total local income tax rate.
out of the
There's
2.5.
47 counties have higher rates than 1.8.
And you think it's appropriate not to look at our debt because it just varies based on projects that are being done at the time?
Well, I think it's important to look at your debt, but to compare from one county to another, again, it's important to look at the makeup of that debt.
It's important to look at the makeup of what those taxes are too, because you can look at where we're at and see that there are some others that are right in that 1.7, 1.8, 1.9 that have a completely different mix of lits than what we have, and maybe even different property tax relief.
Yes.
So I think debt service has to play into that. If we have to, we might be servicing way more debt than they are, and they might have way more income receipts to be able to spend on operating expenses. So just to say we're in the middle, that's good. The middle's a good place to be, but it's hard. Like, you've seen one county, I guess, right?
It's important to know what your revenue is, but it's also important to know where it's going. And that's kind of what the comprehensive financial plan, we kind of talked about this the other day at the county commissioners conference. That report that you have, again, it's good to see where your money is coming, but you want to make sure you're using it appropriately.
I know there's some people question what we spend on, like, the 5-year comprehensive plan every year. To me, it is worth its weight in gold.
If you remember, I think the one that our presentation that we actually did talk to the
over half of, I'd say about half of them did, only because we worked for about half, we worked with a lot of them, so I knew a lot of them in there. But there were definitely a handful that hadn't, but there were a few of them that wanted to, but they couldn't get enough buy-in, but they thought it would be beneficial.
I would probably fight if somebody wanted to stop that. That just, like I said, it's almost the Bible of making sound financial decisions long-term. Plus, we see the trend that's occurred from 19 through 25. We see what we're doing and the trends and the decisions we're making, the impact of those decisions we're making. And then we have kind of a longitudinal, having done that for at least 5 years.
Can I add to that? I agree, the financial plan is invaluable. There's one piece that I guess I'm looking at and trying to determine what the answer is. In my mind, we're looking at these income tax options. There are short-term and long-term consequences and goals of those things. The financial plan gives us, it's almost like a snapshot in time, right? Is there any, do you guys do work in preparing a work plan, if you will, a projection to, we want to do this, this, and this in the future? What's the best course to get us there? It feels to me like we're doing, excuse me, so many things reactionary, PSAP as an example, when maybe we could have prepared and worked towards, we know we need to do this by this time. Is there a way to get ahead of it, I guess, instead of firefighting and trying to come up with dollars all the time because this happened or that happened? Do you guys do that kind of work in the financial plan?
Yeah, definitely. Like an example I can maybe give you is, I guess 2 examples that we do on a relatively often basis is like salary increases. That report right there that we've given you, we can look at, okay, what if we give like I'm just throwing out numbers, but let's say a 3% rate increase this year, and then a 3% increase, next year, and maybe the third year. Well, that's important because maybe you can pay for that first 3% raise, and that's fine. But what happens the second and third year when you compound 3% for 3 years? That report would help you determine, is that something you can afford, going out 3 or 4 years. So that's where I think where you can be more proactive and try to plan, going out, okay, we're just going to do 3% this year, but we're planning on giving 3% next year as well, rather than trying to maybe every year trying to say, okay, scramble, can we do 5% or something like that?
Yeah, wages is one of those things that I agree with you. Everybody builds a budget starting with 3% increment or year over year. But I think we're looking at, EMS, is that something that we should or should not do? And if so, when and to what level? Judicial lit, should we do that? If so, when? We're looking at possibilities of raising taxes. It feels like we need to get together as commissioners and council and departments. And what's this look like for the next 5 years? Who sees what changing? And it can't be a wish list, right? I've done this in business, and you sit down with a whole group and you get their Christmas list, and you got to throw out everything and start with what exactly do we need to get to where we need to be. We only have so much money. We're looking at changing the amount of money to come in. We don't want to increase it too much. We don't want to say, well, we're just going to max this out, and once we've got the dollars, we'll figure out how to spend it. Yep. We need to have a plan to put that in place, and I think we need to work with the commissioners and others to develop what that looks like, to have the dollars needed to meet the objectives of the county. Do you guys facilitate any of those kind of discussions and develop a work plan or those kind of things? That's something that you do.
And I think the example or exercise that you guys did for the PSAP, where looking at hiring you didn't look at, okay, here's your needs today. You looked at what your needs were going forward, a hiring plan. I think that's important to include in a plan like that. I think the capital component, whether it's, police cars or, renovations of buildings, we should try to incorporate that into your cash flow. It's okay, can we accumulate cash on hand? And it might take us 2 or 3 years to, do X. But maybe we can't wait 2 or 3 years. Maybe we do need to do a bond issue, or the next one that comes due, throw that into the bond issue. But I think all those things from both the commissioner's projects and your projects, all that should go into that plan. So
Absolutely.
you can prepare, not just, the year-to-year operating expenses, but some bigger line items.
So is that something that we could do for next year's update? Is that additional cost?
Yeah, we can run as many scenarios as
Everything's an additional cost, right?
But yes, that's definitely, and we do that for a number of communities where we kind of do, sensitivity or what-if scenarios, so they can kind of see what the impact would be, and then that will also help you make a determination as similar to what we did for the PSAP. Do we need 0.1 or 0.2? Well, it depends upon what assumptions you make.
If we go to your website, under your merchandise tab, do you have an AI-generated crystal ball you can sell?
It's out of commission right now.
Okay.
And those expired back in
It would be
2020.
worth $10,000 probably, but
Yeah, well, I heard that when I walked in tonight. So yeah, the comprehensive financial plan that we did last summer, it's really outdated quite a bit because of those decisions. So just that one change,
Right.
is pretty significant looking forward.
And we need to document somewhere in this plan things that, the assumptions that we would make. We had a discussion at our last council meeting about spending dollars on a bridge, $500,000 that needs to be in that account by 2030, I think it was. Mm-hmm. Well, it's not going to just magically appear there, right? We have to figure out how it's going to get there. And if we're setting aside dollars for things, we set aside dollars to lease police vehicles, sheriff's cars. Those need to be in there every year, plus in the following year, then we got to make an additional decision on so that has to change year over year, where the projections that I saw in this are basically just taking the numbers that we have for next year and extrapolating them out. So I think if we can, I don't know what it's going to take, dollars and cents and time is what it's going to take to put a list of assumptions and times and dates and time, and we need to have highway and all the departments, what their expenses changes are that could impact the budget beyond next year. Otherwise, every year we're going to be fighting fires.
No, you're right. I think that's the next step that we need to take, is take that capital planning piece and add it to this, and probably go out a few more years, to be honest with you.
it would be nice.
Just count, well, there's rainy day, the own rainy day fund, we can move money over there, but we'd probably just want to maybe know that we want to have a goal, a balance in your bridge fund, or whatever fund it is that we want to attain by a certain time, and then work with the other funds that knows, okay, how can we either move expenses or raise revenue?
Because this last week, there's been a lot of emails between auditors, and I think there was 3 counties, SP and one, that had less than $1 million in their rainy day fund, and most of them said, this is to do repairs on our building. One of them was to do something with one of the roads, a road or something.
Yeah.
So that's why I didn't know if it all had to stay just in the one rainy day fund.
So they move money into the rainy day fund, but then they actually use it for a
But
project.
that was kind of like what everybody uses to do repairs to their courthouse.
Yeah.
They put money in there to save it. So I didn't know if that was an option with that.
It could be. It could be. I think we can do whatever whatever in your best interest and how you want to keep track of it.
We broached that topic with you at one of the June sessions, I don't know if it was this year or last year, about rainy day fund. And it seems to me, Susan, you brought it up at one of our budget hearings. It seems to me like your advice was, given the option, I'm not sure I would pile a lot of money in the rainy day fund.
Well, what I don't like is put money in the rainy day fund and then spend it. Because then that's kind of like, that's not the real purpose of the rainy day fund. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. But in my mind, the rainy day fund is, that money should be there for a rainy day.
For
And you shouldn't
emergency?
put it in there with the mind to spend it. You should put it in there with the mind not to spend it.
Okay. That's
But
kind of what we've been
that-
doing.
But
It's
as
just
long
not a
as
lot.
that's your goal and that's everyone's impression of what the rainy day fund is for, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. It's just,
You had mentioned once that we should have 50% operation of our operational budget balance before we started using, does that sound like something you would have said, or did I mess that
Or is
up?
that the 6-month thing?
that's the 6 months. If you can, that's a lofty goal. A lot of communities don't have that. I think I looked, you had like 25%, which is still pretty healthy.
A lot healthier than our 0% we had in
Yes.
2019.
Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with moving money over to your general fund now, but I also know that just because of the discussions and raises and everything else, that 25%, there's a good chance that was going to go down. So it's like, why move it to the rainy day if we thought we were going to have to get it in the very near future? I'd rather you just keep it in your general fund where it was probably going to be used.
I'm going to need to leave, and I'm going to turn it over to Susan, but one of the things I pointed out at the end of our council last week, we rank 79 out of 92 counties on our median family income, median household income. Another reason why we really need to be cognizant and plan strategically before increasing any lits, because we are on the lower end. Now, the counter to that is our cost of living, housing, is probably 70 out of 92 counties, so the differential is not that great. But the fact, our average household income is pretty low, and we just need to be aware of that. Anytime we make a change, it's going to affect families and households.
Thank you, Kenan, and thanks for organizing all this. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Jason. And Angela's got some things to say, I think.
I think you usually ask for it June.
It gives us about 3 weeks to study before our budget hearings.
July 1st. I'm supposed to have it in Gateway. July 1st, budgets are supposed to be in Gateway. July 1st. We don't make July 1st. I don't know if we'll slap our hands, but it says we have to have them in Gateway by July 1st.
Jason, is that something you can do earlier than June?
Oh, yeah.
So we could move it up if we needed to.
And you also have to remember that time, you have to give us time to get it done. But yeah, July 1st is what they say, state board of council, we have to have it in Gateway July 1st. It just seems like we're having to work on it, mold it more later in the year until we're coming. And I know that's very frustrating for you guys too. It makes it kind of difficult for us to get around later January 1.
This is the second or third year in a row that our process for assigning raises has been drawn out.
This is probably the worst year we've ever had. It's awful. I mean, we spend more time on, we spend more time today on the phone with the state and everybody else trying to figure out how we're supposed to do this. So we have to figure out.
We really need to have raises completely figured out by the time we close budget session. And then it is just simpler. And I think that, going back to what Shannon shared earlier, the council needs to stop taking the last bit of money and then figuring out how we're going to do raises and have a more strategic plan for raises. And then when we go into budget session, it's not like, oh, we scraped together 300,000, how do we distribute it? We know what we want to do before we go in, and it's more of a commitment to our employees. And then we can decide during budget session, and they don't have to, everyone doesn't have to go through 3 months of drawn out fixing something that should have been done earlier. So I think that's a lot of the drawn out part is the raises. It's been messy for 3 years now, so we need to not do that anymore. If we had a if we actually had a plan for raises, like a 3-year plan, then Debbie could ask department head, this is what the council would like for these different job classes. This is what we'd like you to put in for raises, and we wouldn't be backing everything out, which is another big job during budget session, is backing everything out that we just ask everyone to put in. It's a lot. 25% of the workload is backing out stuff that we ask people to put in.
If we have the 3 to 5 year plan, then when we have our budget sessions, there won't be huge surprises. Oh, we got to do this year. Here's, $200,000. We got to do that this year. Here's 150. We're getting
That's
there.
great.
That was a good step.
I am too. And then when we go through this process of reevaluating job classes, and maybe we get people closer to where they should be, it makes all choices easier.
And there's one thing I would like to see in the numbers, and I don't know if this is Jason or this is the council. So we have a pay of, let's say, $40,000 for this longevity or matrix. I would like to see what the total actual hourly rate is or pay rate is, including longevity and matrix. Instead of just, this is a salary, and this is an extra, what is somebody's actual
Take home. What
Pay
are they
rate.
completely taking home?
That's in the salary ordinance, isn't it?
Are you talking about compared to the WIS data? Yes.
Gotcha, yeah.
Yeah.
if their salary is $40,000 and they get $15,000 in longevity or matrix or both or whatever, then the salary really is $40,000.
Yeah.
That matrix every year or longevity.
Agreed.
2,500 or 5,000 or whatever the longevity has landed on.
And I wasn't clear when Addie was talking if they were confident that they could give us that.
I don't know that that's what you're earning too.
No, well, they
Okay.
have I think what she said was, not everybody gives it to them the same.
That's the problem that I had is, I know. Sure.
I just want to know why. Okay, let's say somebody in your staff has got, it's 2,500.
Right. Part of the problem that we had was Wagner, Irwin, Shealy would give us a number. They'd give us one number. Here's the midpoint. And when I asked them for the number of other municipalities and counties that they compared us to, my question to them was, is longevity in those numbers or is it not? And I understand. You want to see the total and how it compares. And I think that,
Run that every January before the 15th.
yeah.
But to me, that's valuable when you compare it to WIS, because if we're
Yes.
comparing, it makes a huge difference. And that's what I would really like to see, because how do we know how our employees are actually comparing to others?
No, I agree with you. my specific request from Wagner and Shealy is either give me the numbers with longevity in there or without it, with matrix in there or without it, but not a combination of both. They were, they were,
She's not sure yet.
and they're gonna work on that. My conversation with Addie is they're gonna work on that and try to make certain that we see it correctly. Yes.
Right.
That made
It's
it
hard to
very
make good
difficult
decisions if you don't
to-
know what you're looking
to
at.
analyze, yeah. But yeah, I completely agree with you. We need to be able to see those and be able to make that happen.
So Jason, what do you need from me, once I figure out how much to raise the increase is, to send that to you?
Yeah, I guess based upon our conversation here, it sounded like we should update the CFP with the current information, really as soon as we get the books closed in January, and I can get that to you as soon as possible. I'm also thinking what would be helpful is if you could give me, or I can come over here and talk to you, department, or whoever, your capital expenses or projects that you want to fund, like what they are, an estimated cost, and then timing. And I can incorporate that into this report as well and see if we can meet your time frame or not. And then we can say if we can accumulate it or if we need to do a bond issue or what have you. If there's a gap, then we can talk about how to fund that gap, but incorporate that into this report. So I think as soon as you can get January closed for the year, then I can take the appropriations and update this, come back to this group in a draft format. If there's any other scenarios that you want to see, like, maybe raises for the next 2 or 3 years, or anything else, I can incorporate that in this draft, come back and have initial discussion, and then from that, start talking about other scenarios.
I think that sounds good.
Time.
Yes.
I think so too.
Yeah, we're going through, was March our target for reevaluating job classes?
Yeah, we wanted to get something. Our hope was Wagner and Shealy gets through their whole process, but that's going to take, was it 6 months? You remember?
Yeah, I think so, they're supposed to be starting sometime.
We were hoping that they would have us in numbers for our budget for next year, so.
So we know that we potentially over budgeted last year for our raises, anywhere up to 400,000. So when we look at these things right here, even before we look at future planning, we know we need to make sure that we are not over budgeting again next year for operational expenses. So there's probably going to be some type of tax rate adjustment just to cover this ongoing operational expense of wages that we did last year. And then also looking into, capital expenditures and planning for the future. So.
And then I think once we have that, a better picture of that, then in each fund if there is a shortfall, then we can determine, okay, is it short because of operating costs? Do we need to increase the lit? Which lit's the best one to increase? Is it capital? Should we do a bond? Should we get some bonds rolling off? Should we do a bond issue? A jail? Is it a combination of both? I think that's once we have that list of capital, knowing what your current financial situation is, we'll try to fit as many of this capital in your existing revenue stream. If it doesn't fit, then we can look at alternatives.
I think we're going to have a combined work session with the commissioners and maybe some department heads on what all that looks like. And it would be absolutely fantastic and amazing if everybody just agreed on what it all looked like.
And
But I don't
cheerfully
have a clue.
discussed all of the options. So we picked up two pretty significant for our budget expenses this year, an EMS expense of $300,000, and that's, around the discussion of the EMS tax.
But to circle back on that, Susan.
Sure.
The 2022 statute, when it was passed, did have the language that said, the section applies only to counties that provide emergency medical services for all local units in the county and pay 100% of the cost to provide those services. The 2023 amendment removed all that from the statute. So it did remove it, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Kyle.
Very
That is not a legal opinion. That is a factual statement from what I read on the computer.
And then the other one is an increased secure detention for our youth. And I know the commissioners are working through some significant options for that too, and I think there could be budgetary impact regardless of what the solution is. And so I think that we need to talk about that too, because those are some open areas in our budget, is our EMS expense, the secured beds, the potential for a new jail pod, and the fact that we're really trying to pay our employees a fair wage and get there in an appropriate way the next few years.
So Jason, if we did open back up like the new center again, would those salaries be able to come out of position? Because it would be under the judges?
Well, I will tell you that as they reopen, what we're looking at is having somebody come in to look, one, we would not be running without county employees. Is what we're looking
So can contract expenses, yeah, they could be paid.
Since it would be under the judges, because that's always been ran under the because they would be in charge of it. Would that be one that could be taken?
For the judicial or for public safety, for jail?
It doesn't say that on there, but I didn't
No.
know. I mean, if that would be considered judicial staffing.
Again, I'm not an attorney, but it seems like you could make a stretch that it could.
Or what about the jail lit? If they lift
Well,
the
that's where I thought you were
restriction in
going.
operational expenses, potentially it could be run through.
I'm wondering the jail too. That's where I would look at that.
So what's your opinion, Kyle?
It's not a legal opinion. My layperson opinion is that, I mean, I guess it's not community corrections, it's not probation, it's a form of pretrial detention, essentially, correct? So it's like an ambiguous thing that falls within all of those categories, but none of them.
The potential pod, you're saying.
Are you sure about that, Angela? Because they sure are spending a lot out in it, and we've got all new people and a lot more people on for medical out. So they have it?
Is there any other discussion from the council as far as next steps? So I see, like I already said, I think we have a tax receipt deficit that we need to make up just to cover the cost of our raises. And we also need to start working through EMS, the secure detention, potentially opening up the YOC, the jail pod, some of these other things. But as far as how we want to, what's our exact next step moving forward, is there any other discussion?
I think we need to determine what a good ballpark number on the funds needed to be, that we need to generate going forward that encompasses all those things and future raises. And then from there, kind of work backwards and go, all right, what's the best mechanism to fund that? How are we projected to do that? Where can we pull money from that exists already? And see where that leaves us. Pardon me, my voice is horrendous tonight. I can't get rid of this damn cold.
I would like to see us get information from the rest of the leadership in the county to know if we're missing anything. You just gave a very good list of everything that we've identified to this point, but are there things going on that we need to account for in a 3 to 5 year projection that we don't know about? If there is, let's get it in the plan, and it might be something. We just heard one from one department. There might be more. I have no idea what those future plans might be.
I said that our total budget that we passed, including our raises, is more than our expected tax receipts for the year. And we knew that. We were prepared to over budget a couple $100,000 as long as we made up the difference this year. We were prepared to eat it 1 year, but we can't continue to do that for operational expenses.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, we
absolutely.
can use the 100%. Oh, the new, no one has yet.
It would be a simple way for us to bring in enough to cover the raises and additional things. It doesn't help any of the other municipalities. It's $2 million. I went through and added up $2 million total, and if we can cover half of that, that's $1 million. So it's 0.1%.
That gives us a lot of dollars.
And if we pass that in March, there we have easily resolved our over budgeting, which we knew we would have to. We knew we'd have to do it.
And Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't they going back to mandate, judges' employee salaries again? Isn't that, have you heard?
I've heard that.
Yeah, that they're going back up to mandate what the salaries of the secretaries for the judges. So, that's a big job. Did you guys hear me down there? Sorry, I didn't talk very loud.
So Shannon, do you have a recommendation for how we start to gather that information from other leaders? Email?
I guess I would just assume, I'm a big fan of have everybody in the same room and talk about it.
So we could invite everyone to.
It'd have to be a public meeting because
Yeah.
we'd have to have all council and all commissioners present. It'd be a work session really, right? Yeah.
You could do a suggestion box. I'm just kidding.
You would have a lot of suggestions in it, they would be anonymous, and you might not like a lot of
Yeah, most of them wouldn't have anything to do with the budget, really.
We have helped communities, and we have come in and would be maybe our staff would come in and talk to department heads and kind of ask for their, kind of wish list. And then we've reported back to the council and commissioners. I mean, that's something we could do if you don't, not the cheapest thing, hiring us to do that and come in and spend a couple of days, but that's something that we can do.
For the low. Maybe, yeah.
Putting everybody on the spot in a meeting with commissioners and council and I think
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. I've heard both. I've heard, yes, we get a more honest response, but we also get a larger wish list that you have to go through and scratch. So, not trying to give myself not out of work, but to be honest with you, sometimes we get such a big list that it may not be as valuable for you guys to look at but I'm just throwing out there. If you need assistance in administering that, that's something we could do.
So we have one set of tax needs that really impacts just our county budget, and we have options to resolve them. So we could look at it two different ways. You know, we have a potential to pass the court tax and meet our budget needs, and we also want to hear from Newcastle and other impacted. Hear from Newcastle about EMS. I mean, it's going to take a lot of discussion about EMS to figure out the best way to move forward, and then we have to agree what tax rate, if any, we're going to pass to do it. And then likewise, we want to hear from all municipalities about the safety lit needs. And that could be a much more complicated discussion, but we have to do it all at one time in the year. So for our needs, we have to cover those raises this year. We have to get the tax in place.
I'd like to see us get through the holidays and, I don't know, January, February, have that big discussion. Yeah, I'm not opposed to bringing folks in to sit with the departments at all, but then I still think they all need to be in one big meeting to talk about their wish list. If it's on there, great. You know, I think we need to do that, and we need to do it sooner than later. My suggestion would be January, and I'm not opposed to. I don't know what it costs, Jason, to have you guys do that. Do you have a rough dollar figure? I won't hold you to it.
Probably just based on time and expense, it depends on how many meetings really.
Yeah, something that you would come here for, or do over the phone, or remotely, or.
I always like that in person, but cheaper is over the phone, so we can talk about whatever you prefer. You know, we're open to whatever.
Okay.
It's only 45 minutes.
I think we need to have some more discussion about it, determine how we want to go about it.
As we think about things, was it what, 0.1% of a raise in taxes would bring in roughly $1 million income-wise? Is that what we used? Is that still a benchmark or ballpark to?
Income taxes.
Income tax, yeah.
And then if it's all to the county, that's what we keep it.
Yeah, I'd really like to, that your jail tax, since you have accumulated, $2 or $3 million, again, talk about maybe needing a new pot or something, but, there's a surplus on that every year. Again, trying to use the current revenues that you have now efficiently as possible before we start talking about raising income tax. I think I've heard multiple people say that that's our goal. But I think that's really what we want to look at first, is look at what you're currently collecting and how that can be used most efficiently to cover.
Completely
agree.
agree.
Your capital.
We had discussions about the jail lit. We're over collecting almost. We collecting more dollars than we can spend. If we can't spend those dollars, then the jail lit should be reduced to the amount to cover the jail bond plus expenses. That I don't disagree with that at all. And that's, from my standpoint, it's not the council's decision to decide we're building a pod, but if the decision is we're building a pod, then we need to put that in the plan and make sure the darn money's there when it's needed. So, and I know, I've said that. Please. Oh. On the list that Kenan had, you mean? Yes, okay.
Does
So-
Elev- You're good.
That makes a lot of sense, and that helps. That's the kind of discussion we need to be having about, we can't go in and reduce the jail lit when you guys are starting down that road. So I completely get it. So I appreciate that. And
That's not gonna happen overnight,
right,
the shovel in the ground is not gonna happen in January,
right.
but it could happen, before the end of the year.
But if we can use the dollars that are accumulating in there towards part of the construction costs, I'm good. I did not want to see a couple $1 million just sit there for 5 years and overtax the people when we should be able to change it to a different lit and bring in those dollars and use them elsewhere. That was my only thought process during that. So happy to know that that process has started.
Does Elevatus have any type of cost?
Not yet,
It's just all preliminary.
Great big. Steve says big costs. They have an idea of what they want to do already, yeah.
Can you remind me how many beds it is? Because I can't remember how many beds. Well, but the pod, how many? I don't remember what it was supposed to be. Okay. So very preliminary. Okay.
very preliminary, but, the discussions, I don't know what they've been doing. Our discussions have just been preliminary.
So, right. The remaining money in the existing bond, can it not be used for this pod, or could it be?
It could be.
It could be.
There's existing money in there.
Yeah, I mean,
Is there a time frame that has to be used by?
We recommend 3 years, 3 to 4 years, but,
I'm just curious. You don't want the bond company to call it back when we got something else. Oh. Gotcha.
the bond proceeds, yeah. That can be used for operational, and that's what has been tweaked and changed over the years. And now, the intent was that 100% of what you collected could be used for operating. At one time, it was only 20%. If you read the letter of the law, it's like
0.2%, yeah.
Yeah. So that, I think, right now, like this year, you collect an extra $400,000 than what you needed to make your bond payment.
Yeah.
In theory, we could use that to help pay for salaries related to jail.
Right. We budgeted those dollars and then went back and pulled them out after the law was,
that's why we ended up over budgeting, because we thought
Right.
we could use those dollars and then realized maybe there was ambiguity, so we pulled it out.
so we're hoping the legislature clears that up sooner than
So
later.
we didn't want to dump the raises in.
Right.
If you read the
If we read the fund.
I guess while we're on the jail pod discussion, the jail lit, I guess my assumption is that we would bond to build the pod, right?
So my assumption is that we would use the excess jail lit.
Well, yeah, but how, what's it gonna cost to build, do we know? Okay, I guess I was assuming
It'll
it
cost
was
more than 2 million.
more than that.
10.
Steve's holding up 10 behind you. Not to rat you out or anything, Steve.
$27 million, that was before inflation and all the other things, so materials and all that, so my guess is gonna be in 5 or, I don't know,
I mean, if you,
that's 5 to 10 million,
It-
so we could be way off.
because right now we have about 2.5. We'll just say 2.5. It's not enough. I mean, that's of course what we'd use first, but we have to bond for the rest. What'd you say?
Okay.
But our go bond balloons up to take those payments. So,
I guess my thought is if we've got a bond to build the pod, then we need to consider not whether or not we want to raise the jail lit to be able to, so we, before we go making any changes, we probably need to get those decisions made, so. Perfect, thank you. Yeah, operational expenses, including staffing, are all going to increase for a new pod. We already saw utilities increase big time for what's out there compared to what we had budgeted. You add a whole nother pod, the utilities are gonna go up again. So, and then you're right, you gotta staff the whole thing, so.
are there any infrastructure needs, Bobby, that you already know of? Like we had to do the sewage before. Is there any big issue that you already know of?
Much easier to do it now than do it later.
Okay, fellow council, I'm ready to adjourn if there isn't anything else that, and go ahead.
One thing, and then I'll let you go. Something everybody think about. You guys do your meetings on the fourth Thursday. It's really not good timing for us at the end of the month. Like the 29th, you guys are having a meeting. The next day is our last day. We close the book. We close at noon to close all the books out. It's not convenient for us. Could you do it maybe the second Thursday? And I'm gonna say the selfish way, the second is because if you do the third, then we're every week at a meeting, because the commissioners meet. It's a thought for you guys to think about, if you could do it the second Thursday, it would be better for us, timing wise.
We were,
Like the 29th, we have your meeting, if you pass any transfers or something,
right,
then it has to be done the next day because it's
yeah.
closed out the year. Yeah, and then.
What about Friday? We have been talking about moving it to like Friday at 3. So it, no, Friday's no good.
Negative, negative, negative.
No, Fridays aren't good for me at all.
Okay. On a Friday. So is Thursday a good day, just to do a different week? They, yeah.
I just think that if we had it the second week instead of the fourth week of the month, that it would be more convenient for us, trying to get things like that done. Budgets are due, like November 1st. You know, we're not having our meeting until the last Thursday in October, and if something happens, we don't have any wiggle room. It affects the treasurer's office too, because they have to close out in the month before doing something that's last day and just. Yeah, it's just really hard for us on the fourth Thursday.
That seems to make sense. A little extra cushion.
It doesn't matter to me. I don't, yeah,
And I mean, it's
that's
just
good.
something I wanted to throw there for you guys.
Me either.
And I
Yeah.
don't care what day of the week, just not Fridays.
Okay.
I don't care what day of the week, but that second week would be much better.
Okay. Where it works. So we'll get that set for sure at our next council meeting.
Yeah.
When we have Betsy and Kenan here. Anything else? Anything from our audience that came to talk through things with us today? Do you have anything else for us? Okay. Yes, Steve? We're happy to do that. Shannon, why don't you give a status on what we know and what we're doing for the highway superintendent? Because I saw an email from you. You just requested the existing copy of the,
Yeah. I asked about it at the, thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Jason.
The old superintendent, or no, the old engineer, the old engineer's job description, I asked Stephanie to pull that and send it to Joe and Braden as well, but I do not know where the status of that request either is. Yeah, I don't remember which day it was. It's all running together for me.
Do we have a target date where our goal to get it resolved by? Okay. Okay, because, I mean, we can have a special meeting whenever. Okay.
Sure. Addie was going to look into, or Stephanie was going to ask Addie if she had the availability to evaluate those two before our meeting at the end of the month. If she can, that would be great. I can't speak for her availability. Kind of splitting them apart again. Yeah.
So will we be hiring a new assistant superintendent? Okay, but that's the job description. That's what we're writing it up. Superintendent. That's the only, and then are we writing up the engineer as a part-time position?
But yeah, he needs a job description classified as part-time.
That makes sense. Okay. So if we get the job descriptions and pass those salary ordinances, do you guys still have to do anything related to us? You just need to do us to do that as soon as possible so you can move forward. So if we get them back from Addie, we could have a special meeting.
He's already gone part-time in Randolph County. I mean, that Randolph County, it was just, they did it. You know, he's okay with it. I mean, there's not a combined superintendent engineer position.
He was already kind of considered a part-time engineer over there. They're just, yeah. Yeah, because they just reimbursed us for his time, yeah. I'll follow up with Stephanie and see if she's heard anything from Addie. No problem. Okay. Good.
So thank you, Bobby and Steve, for coming to our work session tonight. That's really helpful, and we really appreciate it. And Debbie and Bobby, thank you for helping us. And is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.